You have spent your life thinking you are merely observing reality, carefully cataloging the world around you. But every thought you nurture, every insight you claim as yours, is already folding back on itself, shaping you in ways invisible, uncontrollable, relentless. What if the mind you trust most is quietly undermining everything you believe about who you are? Deep thinkers don't simply see the world, they dissect it. Every interaction, every silence, every flicker of emotion in someone else's eyes becomes a data point in a private investigation no one asked them to conduct. Psychology calls it metacognition, thinking about your thinking, scrutinizing your own mind like a suspicious stranger. You notice patterns others ignore, the micro-lies in casual conversations, the contradictions in people's beliefs, the empty laughter hiding silent collapse. Your brain refuses to accept surface-level explanations, digging until answers bleed. Yet, with every layer uncovered, a new one waits beneath, mocking your hunger for certainty. The more you understand, the less stable reality becomes, because each truth dissolves the moment you touch it. Curiosity becomes a trap disguised as intelligence. If you can never stop analyzing the world, how long until you start analyzing yourself to pieces? Most people drift through existence on autopilot, protected by psychological shortcuts that filter out the unbearable. But you can't ignore the machinery behind the moment. Cognitive scientists call it hyperreflection, an ability to see not only what is happening, but why it terrifies you. You notice the quiet repetition in your routines, the absurd loops of society, the way every desire is just a distraction from the silent question underneath. What is any of this for? Deep thinking tears away the comforting illusions humans depend on: purpose, progress, permanence. You stand face to face with life's raw mechanism, recognizing that meaning isn't discovered. It is fabricated. And the terrible part? You know you're the one forced to fabricate it, alone, endlessly aware of the emptiness just beneath the narrative. What happens to a mind that can no longer believe the story it tells itself to survive? Understanding creates distance. The deeper you think, the farther you drift from the people who are content with easy answers. Social psychology calls it differential self-awareness. Your mind operates at a level that others may find uncomfortable, pretentious, or threatening. So you begin to withhold your thoughts, learning that most conversations are not designed for truth, but for mutual reassurance. You nod, you smile, you dilute your ideas to avoid the look, that flicker of confusion or resentment. When someone realizes you see through the facade they depend on, you tell yourself you value depth, complexity, authenticity. But in the silence after others leave, another realization echoes. Your standards are also your prison. You crave connection, yet reject anything shallow enough to be accessible. You choose solitude, but secretly mourn the world that can't meet you where you live, inside the labyrinth of your own mind. If no one can follow your thoughts, how long before you lose the ability to return to where they are? You've noticed that answers never satisfy you for long. As soon as one lands, another question rises, sharper, hungrier. This is the psychological phenomenon of rumination. Not merely thinking deeply, but being trapped in thought. Your mind loops through meaning, purpose, identity, never resting, never accepting that some things cannot be resolved. You tear apart every belief until nothing feels stable enough to stand on. People call this curiosity a gift, but gifts shouldn't feel like drowning. You can't switch it off. The recursive urge to peel the world open, even when all that's left beneath the final layer is the terror of not knowing. The closer you get to the core of reality, the more it slips away, as if existence is deliberately designed to stay just beyond your understanding. What if the very pursuit of truth ensures you will never feel it? Deep thinking eventually turns inward. You begin questioning not just the world, but the one who is questioning. Psychology calls it self-concept fragmentation, the shattering of a stable identity under too much introspection. You examine every motive as if it might be a lie, every desire as if it might be manipulation, every emotion as if it might be camouflage for something darker. You watch yourself living, like a scientist observing a stranger trapped in your skin. At first, this feels like enlightenment, the ability to detect your own flaws with surgical precision. But then a quieter realization emerges. If you are constantly analyzing who you are, how can you ever simply be? Your mind becomes an interrogation room, where you are both the prisoner and the investigator, endlessly demanding answers from yourself that you cannot give. What happens when you no longer trust the person behind your thoughts? Your mind is tuned to recognize the hidden architecture of life, the cycles of behavior, the silent rules beneath social chaos, the subtle cues that reveal what people are too afraid to say aloud. Psychologists call this pattern sensitivity, and it feels like a superpower until you realize what you're actually seeing: the predictability of everything. Habits replace spontaneity. Instinct replaces choice. Even your deepest decisions reveal themselves as rehearsed responses to old wounds. The more patterns you recognize, the less free anything feels. You begin noticing how every relationship repeats the same dynamics, how every joy has an expiration date already stamped onto it, how every dream is just a reaction to something you're running from. The world loses its mystery as it becomes too easily decoded, a puzzle that keeps solving itself in the same unbearable way. If existence is so predictable, what reason do you have left to continue playing along? You tell yourself you're alone because people don't understand you, because your thoughts are too deep, too complex, too sharp for ordinary minds. But psychology suggests something more unsettling: intellectualization, using thought as a shield to avoid emotional vulnerability. Maybe you analyze people so intensely because you're terrified of being known, noticed, seen, judged. The distance you feel might not be the world rejecting you, but you rejecting the world before it ever gets the chance to hurt you. You construct mental fortresses out of insights and observation, convinced that wisdom must be earned through isolation. Yet in the quiet hours, exhaustion creeps in, the kind that emerges when you finally admit that depth means nothing if you're sinking alone. But now you're trapped in a paradox. Opening up requires trust, and trust requires surrendering the very overthinking that keeps you safe. If connection demands vulnerability, will you ever allow yourself to feel less alone? Most people survive by believing the future is a blank space waiting to be shaped. But deep thinkers see ahead: cause, effect, the cascading consequences of every tiny decision. Psychologists refer to this as anticipatory cognition, a mind always leaning forward, mapping outcomes before they happen. At first, it feels like foresight. Eventually, it feels like fatalism. If you can predict how something ends, why bother beginning? Ambition decays into resignation. Relationships feel temporary from the very first touch. Even joy becomes suspicious. Just another fragile moment counting down to its disappearance. You're not afraid of the unknown. You're afraid of how painfully known it already feels. The tragic irony: the more you understand the trajectory of life, the less willing you become to participate in it. If every path you imagine leads to disappointment, where exactly are you supposed to go? Awareness is heavy. Your brain never grants you the mercy of numbness. You feel the tension in every conversation, the subtext behind every glance, the discomfort people try to hide under humor or distraction. Psychologists call this high sensory and emotional attunement. But it doesn't feel like a talent. It feels like a weight pressing from every angle. You are constantly decoding, adjusting, anticipating, analyzing. Even silence becomes another message to interpret. You're never just present. You're managing 1,000 invisible threads at once. The world is loud, even when it's quiet. Being awake in a society that prefers sleep is not enlightenment. It's fatigue with no off switch. You long for a moment of peace. But the moment peace appears, you dissect it until it's gone. If your mind refuses to rest, how long before you collapse under the thoughts that never stop thinking themselves through you? You've spent so long questioning everything that you've forgotten what it feels like to believe anything. Psychologists call it identity diffusion, when who you are becomes a fluctuating hypothesis instead of a grounded truth. You adapt to every situation, shifting, refining, analyzing yourself like a concept still in beta. You're terrified of being wrong, so you commit to nothing. You want to be understood, but you're always changing the person others are trying to understand. You confuse complexity with authenticity, thinking that if you peel back enough layers, eventually the real you will emerge. But each layer you remove reveals another beneath it, as if your entire personality is a trick of mirrors reflecting back nothing but the questions you fear you already know the answer to. Maybe there is no final layer. Maybe the thinker and the thoughts are hollow without each other. If your identity exists only as a question, who is the one asking it? You believe reflection is wisdom, but psychology warns of over-reflection, the phenomenon where thinking about thinking becomes a cage. Each decision, each action, each fleeting emotion is replayed and dissected until the original experience is lost, replaced by an endless simulation inside your mind. You no longer act. You pre-act, post-act, react. Life becomes less about living and more about rehearsing life. The irony is brutal. The very tool that grants you insight also ensures your paralysis. You notice your patterns, your flaws, your unconscious drives, but noticing does not free you. It chains you to a constant surveillance of self. The mind that observes cannot escape itself. You may call it self-awareness, but it is also self-imprisonment. If the eye watching you is always awake, who will ever be asleep enough to rest? Deep thinkers crave mastery over life, yet psychology exposes the cruel truth of illusion of control, the belief that thought can dictate reality. You analyze, plan, anticipate, convincing yourself that understanding is power. But life does not bend to understanding. Accidents happen, people betray, systems fail, and no amount of foresight can shield you from chaos. The more you try to control, the more glaringly uncontrollable everything becomes. Every pattern you detect is only a temporary comfort. Every prediction merely a map that collapses as soon as you rely on it. Your mind's desire for certainty blinds you to its absence, and the harder you grip, the faster it slips. Perhaps the cruelest revelation is that the more you think you are steering, the more you are merely observing the inevitable unfold, helplessly, with awareness as your only companion. If control is an illusion, why does your mind insist it is real? Every deep thinker carries an invisible enemy, their own mind. Psychology calls it intrusive thought patterns, sudden, unwelcome ideas that arise without consent, undermining confidence, twisting perception, planting doubt. You analyze relentlessly, yet some thoughts evade logic, slipping into your consciousness like shadows no light can touch. You argue, reason, dismiss, but they persist, morphing with every new insight, until certainty itself becomes a ghost. The mind that seeks clarity becomes its own saboteur. Each realization exposes flaws, contradictions, and limitations, not in the world, but in you. You begin to suspect that your deepest self is nothing but a construction, a house of mirrors designed to trap you in reflection, forever questioning the solidity of even the floor beneath your feet. And the quietest terror emerges. Perhaps there is no escape, because the very act of thinking is the act of betraying yourself. If your mind conspires against you, who else could ever be trusted? You have peeled back every layer, scrutinized every pattern, traced every cause, and yet the world still offers no answers. Psychology calls this existential anxiety, the paralyzing awareness that meaning is not discovered but constructed, fragile and temporary. Every belief you held, every framework you trusted, begins to crumble under the weight of your own insight. Purpose becomes a mirage, morality a negotiation, identity a question mark. You notice that even joy is transactional, suffering inevitable, and connection fleeting. Every attempt to anchor yourself in understanding only highlights the futility of trying. The more you probe, the less solid reality feels. Your thoughts echo back like walls collapsing, each reflection revealing only more emptiness. If the scaffolding of meaning is artificial, what do you stand on when the mind that built it turns against itself? You have descended through layers of thought, watched yourself in the mirrors of cognition, traced every shadow in the architecture of your mind. Every section of insight has folded back onto itself, revealing that the observer, the observed, and the act of observation are inseparable, yet empty. Psychology calls it cognitive entanglement, a mind aware of its own mechanisms, until awareness itself becomes a prison. There is no resolution here, no comforting synthesis. Your identity is a question mark, your purpose a construct, your reality a fragile illusion. Each thought you believed was yours has betrayed you, looping endlessly, a recursive hall of mirrors with no exit. Even the act of reading this, of knowing, does not liberate you. It only tightens the lens through which you perceive futility. You have been awake long enough to see that all depth is recursive, all insight isolating, all knowledge collapsing inward. The thinker and the thoughts, the questions and the answers, they are all one. If you cannot trust reality, the self, or thought itself, then what is left but the void?